Take a guess as to where 20% of your daily calories come from. I'm gonna bet you didn't guess it was simply from the oils used to cook and create your favorite foods. Seed oils are taking over our diets and have done so in a staggeringly small amount of time. But at the risk of sounding conspiratorial, what impact is that having on us and the planet that we call home? Are they really a healthy alternative to unhealthy things like butter, or is the seed oil lie they've sold us actually destroying us? Hi everyone, I'm Amber from Sustainable Jungle, where we share sustainability tips, tricks, brands, hacks, products, and stories to better our planet. And today, I want to tell you a story about something that is so pervasive in our lives that hardly anyone bats an eye at, and that's seed oils. But before we talk about what these are and why you should avoid them as much as possible, please take a second to hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons for our channel if you haven't done so already, so that you can stay tuned on the latest in sustainability content that we have for you. Now, first things first, what are seed oils? Well, as you might have guessed, they're vegetable oils extracted from the seeds, surprise, surprise, of various plants. And there's a ton of different ones out there. But for the most part, when people these days talk about seed oils in a negative context like this one, they mean one of the following: soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, canola oil, peanut oil, rice bran oil, grapeseed oil, and cottonseed oil. You probably recognize some of these from your favorite recipes or just what you already have in your pantry, and that's because these oils are widely used in cooking, baking, and processed foods due to their affordability and long shelf life. Globally, we consumed over 200 million metric tons of seed oils in 2019, which is especially impressive, or insidious, if you consider that most of these were completely non-existent for the vast majority of human dietary evolution. Because today, seed oils are in nearly all processed foods. They're used as the cooking oil in most restaurants, and they're even hidden within processed foods billed as healthy and popular alternatives like milk alternatives. I'm not being overdramatic when I say that they are in everything, in America at least. Now, I do want to make that clear because I know that that's not the case in a lot of other countries that have stricter regulations about what you can and can't put in food. So, to my fellow Americans anyway, do you buy crackers? How about chips, tortilla shells, bread, salad dressing, plant milk? Well, you're also buying seed oils. We deep fry our food in sunflower oil, we bake our cookies with canola oil, we brush our teeth and wash our hair with palm oil. In fact, because palm oil is so versatile, it appears in a whopping 50% of things that you'll find in the grocery store. I personally cut seed oils more or less out of my diet a couple years ago, and at first, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had to completely rethink how I shopped for food, and my already existing label reading tendencies went to a whole nother level. Now these days, I pretty much eat exclusively whole or homemade foods, and I rarely even visit the center aisles in the grocery store. But it wasn't always like this. So how did we get to this point? It all started in the late 1800s when cottonseed oil, which until then was considered a toxic waste byproduct that we now consume, started to be used in soap making and as lamp fuel. But it wasn't really until the 1950s that we actually saw seed oil trends rise, when plant breeders in Canada started experimenting with new versions of the rapeseed plant. Now, this plant was never really historically used for food because of its high content of urucic acid and glucosinolates. But these breeders developed a low version rapeseed of all these things, and that became known as canola oil, which was introduced to US markets in 1985 when it received a generally recognized as safe status. Fast forward to only 4 decades later, and the average American consumes more than 40 grams, or about 3 tablespoons of vegetable oils each day. That's to the tune of about 25 kilograms per year. Why the skyrocketing popularity, you ask? Well, like most things, seed oils are cheap. If you go to the grocery store, you typically spend anywhere from $3 to $6 for a 32-ounce bottle of canola oil. Olive oil, on the other hand, like a bottle like this, can cost upwards of $20 for that same 32-ounce bottle, depending on the grade and quality. It might even be more than that. This cost is reflected on a commercial level too, so it's no wonder that all these processed food companies have foregone using higher quality oils for cheap seed oils. In fact, I recently resorted to making my own salad dressings because I could literally no longer find a single option in my local grocery store that didn't use seed oils. Even brands that I had once trusted and used olive oil until recent years, I suddenly noticed had switched secretly to soybean and canola oil. If you start reading labels, trust me, you will see how utterly pervasive they are. So, why is this bad? Why should we care? Well, the answer is two-pronged. First and foremost, the environment. Sustainability is our niche here at Sustainable Jungle, after all. And crops used for seed oil production require significant amounts of land, water, and pesticides, all told contributing to water scarcity, deforestation, biodiversity loss, and chemical pollution. Currently, the world devotes around 32 million hectares to oilseed crops, which, for reference, is about the size of India. 133 million hectares of that are soybean alone, significantly more than any other crop, which is especially scary considering that even didn't really become a thing until 2010, when overnight, as in literally a decade, it became the most prolific oil used in America. And there's pros and cons to each different seed oil crop. For instance, we've probably all heard about the dangers of palm oil in terms of deforestation and habitat loss, which has directly threatened almost 200 different species now. But on the flip side, palm oil is the most efficient traditional oil crop there is, producing 4 times more oil per hectare than sunflowers, over 6 times more than soybeans, and 11 times more than olives. It produces about 35% of all vegetable oil on less than 10% of the land allocated to oil crops. But the biggest environmental issue facing just about all seed oil crops? Genetic modification. More than 90% of commercially grown canola, 93% of soybean, 88% of corn, and 94% of cottonseed plants are genetically modified in the United States. Now, I'm not going to go super in-depth as to why this is environmentally unsustainable, but if you're a little fuzzy on the details, I recommend watching our other 2 videos on biodiversity loss and heirloom seeds, and I'll link to those in the description below. But basically, it boils down to the fact that we are losing a staggering amount of crop diversity. 93% of seed varieties historically cultivated for food were already extinct by the year 1990, and that number is just growing. This isn't just making for a really vulnerable food system, but it's also driving biodiversity loss in a really big way. And let's not forget that most seed oil crops are grown using unsustainable monocropping practices, which is basically where one crop is planted in an area year after year without rotating the fields to help restore the soil. This depletes soil nutrients and thus is going to require heavy chemical inputs to counteract that lack of nutrients in the soil and to prevent pests. Now, does this mean that seed oil alternatives don't have their share of environmental problems? Absolutely not. Between 500 and 1,000 liters of water are needed to produce 1 liter, like this bottle here, of olive oil. And to keep up with the 80 million gallon demand of olive oil that we have, we are seeing a lot of erosion near olive oil plantations. Now, on the positive side, olive trees are perennials, which means that they don't die off and require replanting each year. So they don't have nearly the same degree of land use or deforestation issues as other seed oil crops. They're also not genetically modified, and it's pretty easy to find organic growers. For every million liters of coconut oil produced, 20 different plant and animal species are threatened. And this is compared to palm oil at a surprisingly low 3.8 species per that same amount of oil. Plus, lots of coconut farmers are still dramatically underpaid despite the high value of coconut oil in countries like the US. As for avocado oil, well, a single avocado requires over 60 gallons of water to produce, and it can take 10 pounds of avocados to produce a standard 16.9 ounce bottle of olive oil. Avocados are also associated with higher CO2 emissions since they often travel significant distances from where they're grown. On to the second reason why seed oils are bad, and here's where we're going to get a little controversial. You may have seen articles like, "Why is the right so obsessed with seed oils?" And these articles are meant to be as inflammatory as the seed oils themselves. And it should speak volumes that that's really the only light in which we talk about them in mainstream media, which, of course, is largely funded by large corporations, including food conglomerates who definitely do not want you to stop eating seed oils because then, guess what? You'll have to stop buying just about all their products. Almost 30% of the calories now consumed in the US and UK come from seed oils. That's up from roughly 0 just 80 years ago. You want to know what else is up astronomically across that same period of time? Chronic inflammatory diseases. In fact, these diseases like heart disease, asthma, cancer, and diabetes have increased 700% since 1935. In the 1930s, chronic disease was prevalent in 7.5% of adults, and by 2000, it was 45%, and by 2020, it was 60%. That's right. 6 in 10 Americans have a chronic inflammatory disease, and heart disease is the leading cause of death worldwide. Smoking usually gets the accusatory finger first, but Here's the thing. Fewer Americans are smoking than ever before, down from 45% in 1955 to just 14% today. Yet, disease rates have never been higher. And yes, there's a lot of factors at play here, like indoor and outdoor air pollution, and the fact that 90% of the food in US grocery stores is synthetic processed garbage that's not even legal to sell in other countries. Or it could have something to do with the fact that analysis of subcutaneous adipose tissue in the USA revealed an approximate 2.5-fold increase in linoleic acid from 1959 to 2008. But let me back up just a minute. Vegetable oils and seed oils are rich in omega-6 fatty acids, which are essential for our health. But the problem is that the modern diet often contains too much omega-6 and too little omega-3. The omega-6 to omega-3 ratio should ideally be 2-to-1 or even 1-to-1, but for most Americans, that ratio is actually a whopping 10-to-1 and even 20-to-1 in some cases. Now, linoleic acid is an omega-6 that can't be synthesized by the body, so it bioaccumulates over time. In fact, it can take up to 2 to 4 years to be cleared from adipose tissue. Its content also varies by different oils, with safflower, grapeseed, poppy seed, and sunflower seed being the highest. Now, I'm going to get a little technical here for a moment. Now, this is a problem because linoleic acid is a precursor for a pro-inflammatory molecule called arachidonic acid, and that basically leads to greater endothelial activation and thus oxidative stress on the body than a diet that's high in saturated fat, which isn't as bad as we've been sold. Now, this is all basically just a fancy way of saying it inflames the body down to a cellular level. Numerous rodent studies have shown all kinds of negative health impacts as a direct result of a diet high in linoleic acid by way of seed oils, particularly cancer, like lung and breast cancer, high cholesterol, weight gain, damage to reproductive health, macular degeneration, neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's, heart disease, stroke, cardiac arrest, insulin resistance, it just goes on. There's even been links to immunosuppression, anxiety, depression, and genetic changes to about 100 different genes. One study in particular found that tumors began forming once rats consumed 20% of their fat in the form of linoleic acid. Now remember that seed oils aren't just 20% of our fat intake, but 20% of our entire daily caloric intake. Another study showed that feeding mice soybean oil led to a decrease in hypothalamus-produced oxytocin, aka, the love hormone that makes us feel connected and belonging to those around us. And yes, I know, humans are not mice or rats, but considering that few people have studied the effects of seed oils on humans at all, we might as well be lab rats because for the last 50 years or so, we've been living in one giant dietary experiment. Because how could we study it really? How could we study the long-term effects of seed oils when they've only been around for 50 years or so, and they've never been more prevalent in food than the last 10? The sad fact is that these generations today will likely be the ones to help fuel those studies in the future. Now, the limited human research that we do have on the matter includes one study by the Los Angeles Veterans Administration. They basically had a group that increased fat from vegetable oil while keeping total fat consumed the same, and they found that they were 82% more likely to die from cancer compared to the control group that didn't increase fat from vegetable oil. Another study demonstrated 92% of the participants from the group consuming corn oil experienced an increase in cardiac events and a 364% increased risk of death. And here's the thing. It's not entirely the oil crops themselves that determine which ones are good and which ones are bad for you. It's how it's made. Some of these seed oils would actually otherwise be really high in vitamin E, phenols, and antioxidants if not for the refining process itself, which removes anything beneficial. Canola oil, for instance, isn't inherently unhealthy. It's actually similar to olive oil in that it's high in monounsaturated fat, but the problem is that the entities marketing canola oil as a healthy cooking oil FDA and Canola Council, who definitely do not have a vested interest in aiding the proliferation of this highly processed oil. The things that they don't want you to know is that how it's processed matters. Whereas most olive oil, say, is cold pressed or expeller pressed, which basically means turning whatever it is that becomes the oil into a paste and pressing it through a series of discs to extract that oil from the solid without chemically altering the structure of the oil. Canola oil, on the other hand, along with most commercial seed oils, are chemically processed using a solvent extraction method that relies on bathing it in hexane. Now, this is a highly flammable chemical made from crude oil. It's also used as a cleaning agent in textile and furniture manufacturing, manufacturing, a degreaser in the printing industry, and a base for paint thinner and glue. And let's not forget that then these oils are often then refined further, bleached and deodorized to change their color and to improve the flavor of the plant. Sounds really delicious, right? Now, this process does try to recover and remove as much of the hexane as possible, but there's still typically residue left over in the finished oil. While the European Union set a maximum residual limit of 1 milligram per kilogram of hexane residue in vegetable oils, surprise, surprise, the FDA does not currently monitor or regulate hexane residue in foods, except for fish, protein isolate, hop extract, and spice resins. So we actually have no idea how much hexane remains in our finished food products, let alone its long-term impact on environmental and human health. Because, of course, it's also been classified as a hazardous air pollutant under the EPA's Clean Air Act. Short-term hexane inhalation exposure can cause mild effects on the central nervous system, including dizziness, nausea, and headaches, and long-term exposure is associated with outright nerve damage, numbness, muscular weakness, blurred vision, headaches, and fatigue. Now, while we're more concerned about consuming it, if breathing it has that kind of impact, surely ingesting it is not magically benign. But unfortunately, we don't actually know because there haven't been any studies conducted looking at the impact of hexane ingestion on living beings. Hexane and heat also affect molecular stability, which can cause the oil to turn rancid and cause it to form free radicals when it's heated again. You know, like we do with almost all cooking oils. Now, free radicals damage DNA, and they're actually the main cause of the formation of oxidative stress in the human body, which can be counteracted with antioxidants, except that in heating the seed oils and processing them, we also have already gotten rid of all those. A 2010 study found that mice fed with soybean oil that had been heated in a deep fryer showed 4 times greater cancer metastasis than mice fed unheated oil. So the next time your server asks you fries or a salad, you might want to remember that. Unstable oils can also oxidize, which is a process that creates 2 harmful byproducts. Number 1 is trans fats, and number 2 is liquid peroxide, which can accumulate in the body, destroy DNA, membrane lipids, and promote aging and disease. Knowing all this, what do we do about it? Well, I will be the first one to tell you that cutting seed oils out of your life is hard, with a capital H. There are things that I simply cannot buy anymore without seeking out very specialty, i.e. expensive alternatives online. And I try to avoid ordering food online as much as I can. But things like tortilla shells, tortilla chips, and crackers, forget it. Not a single option in my local Safeway without seed oils. And trust me, I have spent an embarrassing amount of time reading labels in the aisles. But as with just about anything, the key is not necessarily total abstinence, but a severe degree of moderation compared to our current dietary habits. So for me, I don't eat out very often just because pretty much every restaurant cooks with seed oils. And though when I say, go on vacation maybe twice a year, I give myself permission to eat out and not worry about what my dinner was cooked in that week, because 1 week of eating seed oils is probably not going to kill me. So the first and easiest thing that you can do is to stop cooking with them directly and swap to healthy alternatives in your house. So these healthy alternatives include olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, and animal-derived greases like tallow and butter. Now, unlike seed oils, which are chemically processed, these are all minimally processed, especially if you buy organic and unrefined versions, as I recommend that you do. Things like extra virgin olive oil are actually rich in omega-3s instead of just omega-6s, so that creates a better balance. And if you're worried about the cost of buying things like this, consider this. This tub of beef tallow right here costs me $30, and it lasts my partner and I of cooking with it multiple times a day for at least 6 months. Now, is that maybe a little bit more expensive than a $3 bottle of canola oil? Sure, but it's still pretty darn cost effective. Plus, beef tallow is an otherwise byproduct of the meat industry that is really only processed through heating. You just render the beef fat down into tallow. I've actually even started making my own by collecting fat offcuts from steaks and then freezing them until I have enough to do the rendering process. Now, if you're vegan or vegetarian or just don't really like the idea of tallow, check out the brand Safisana. They sell these bulk cardboard refill taps of olive oil. And sure, this 5-liter box here does currently cost $148, but mine here is finally just about empty after over a year and a half of use, and we cook with it literally every day. That breaks down to more or less $8 a month. Now, you pay more than that for Netflix. But you can also consider new seed oil alternatives like Zero Acre Oil, which is a new type of oil made through fermentation. Compared to soybean oil, it emits 86% fewer greenhouse gases, consumes 83% water, and uses 90% less land. Plus, it's sold in aluminum aluminum bottles. And side note, we're not affiliated with this company in any way. I had never actually even heard of them until researching for this video, but I'm definitely interested in trying them out now. And if you are going to buy seed oils, seek out explicitly cold pressed or expeller pressed versions. They do exist, but they're just a lot harder to find, and you'll end up paying comparable prices to non-seed oils. Another tip is to start making your own things that you might otherwise buy. So for instance, I make all of my own bread and salad dressing now, both of which I can do using 3 ingredients each, instead of a laundry list of things found in even the healthiest grocery store options. And yes, while there's definitely going to be some experimentation involved here as you find out what things do and don't work, but that's just kind of given. For instance, I tried making my own tortilla chips in my air fryer, and that was a near inedible disaster. But don't be afraid to tweak recipes a bit either. Lots of baking recipes call for vegetable oil or something like Crisco. Instead, swap it for a low flavor healthy oil like coconut oil, butter. You could even swap it for Greek yogurt or applesauce if you want to forego the oils altogether. I use Greek yogurt all the time when I'm baking, and my recipes pretty much always come out the same. All of that said, it's still not an easy transition to make if you live in countries like the US or UK, but it's well worth it. After all, when it comes right down to it, eating a high amount of seed oils is third only to severe obesity and heavy smoking in terms of increased risk of death. That means heavy seed oil consumption is more dangerous than heavy drinking, moderate smoking, sugar intake, red meat intake, sodium, and insert all of these other things that we've been told to avoid. So, what are your thoughts on seed oils? Is this the first time you've heard of this, or have you been seed-free for years? Let us know in the comments below, and please don't forget to subscribe and like our channel if you found this video helpful or interesting, because we have loads more like it. Now, once again, I'm SJ's Amber, and I'm off to go make a seed oil-free salad, but I will catch you later.